Hello and welcome to the CS Week Women Utilities webinar series. I'm Lisa Collins, the Educational Director at CS Week, and your host today. This program will be recorded and available for playback along with our other archive presentations later this afternoon. You'll find it by selecting Women Utilities under the Webinars menu tab choice from our homepage, csweek.org. So attendees, you're encouraged to upload your questions in the Q&A panel as they arise. However, I'm going to hold them until we reach the Q&A segment at the end of the presentation. Please ensure that you address your questions to all panelists so that we don't overlook any. And I would like now to introduce our moderator for today's webinar. This is Cassandra Johnson with our webinar sponsor, AAC Utility Sponsors. Welcome, Cassandra.
Well, thank you, Lisa, and good afternoon, everyone who's on the webinar. Today's discussion is mastering the art of negotiation. Great topic. We all can learn something here. Let's listen for tasty nuggets. We've got a fantastic presenter. We'll be hearing from Sharon Grove, who is the Assistant General Manager of Customer Service Division at the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Los Angeles Department of Water and Power is the largest municipal utility in the United States, serving over 4 million residents. As its Assistant General Manager of the Customer Service Division, Sharon Grove is responsible for overseeing customer operations across the electric and water service territory, including call center, credit and collections, premier account management, customer programs for energy efficiency and water conservation, customer policy and technology. She leads efforts to direct and position customer experience strategies, aligning business processes, understanding market and customer insights, and ensuring customer contact channel strategies mesh with these operations. Through her experience working at utilities across the country, Sharon learned the importance of integrity, trusting your instincts, and honing your ability to self-assess. She is committed to imparting these lessons to the next generation of leaders in the industry. And without further delay, I would like to say, welcome, Sharon. The presentation is all yours.
Great. Thank you, Cassandra. Totally appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. I'm happy to be presenting this topic to you today. I specifically asked to be able to talk about this topic at a Women in Utilities webinar because I believe this is a very empowering set of tools for us. They have proven effective for me in the past, and I really believe they can work for you. Negotiation is an uncomfortable thing for many women, but it's actually not only a fun topic, it's a crucial skill to have when navigating your career and your personal lives. I've coached many of my managers on this topic over the course of my career because I view negotiation as a life skill. We all have our definitions of what those life skills are, you know, like always having a plan B and inspecting what you expect and the golden rule. But more often than not, we ignore the critical life skill of learning to advocate for ourselves. Today you will leave equipped with some fundamentals of how to do just that. And to give you a little background about myself, and you know, I think Cassandra summed it up a little bit, and of course I hate talking about myself, but just to add a little bit of flavor, I've spent the majority of my career in the utility industry. I love this industry. I think it has become more exciting every year, and I spent a long time, you know, deciding to finally go back and get my MBA from Kellogg. And after being part of a negotiation course, I really sort of got religion around negotiation, and I've been coaching not only my colleagues and my employees, but even my relatives on some of the skills that I learned there. So on that note, let's just dive in. So it makes me nuts when I hear someone like a female Wharton MBA say they are not good at negotiation. Well, you don't have to really be that good. You just have to do it. I read this in an article. It really stood out to me. This quote reminds me that there's so many more things in life that are negotiable. And like Beth says, you don't have to be a master at it, but you do need to do it. And like anything else, the more you practice, the better you'll get. So today, I'm going to give you some background on women and negotiations. Specifically, my goal is to help you understand what you can do to become a better negotiator right away, and to help define what true success means in a negotiation. Contrary to popular belief, it isn't both parties leaving the table sort of getting what they sort of wanted. That is not a successful negotiation. Normally, I present this information in a half-day seminar, and it gives attendees the chance to practice with each other on some of the techniques. But for purposes of this webinar, I've pared it down to talk you through just the basic techniques today. Also, after the webinar, we're going to have a little quiz, and you'll receive a copy of the presentation and a booklet that they're going to mail out, and it's a really nice, handy tool to be able to practice negotiation skills with. So the objective today is to provide you with some easy-to-remember tools for all of life's negotiations. In the past, coming on strong or openly dominating a negotiation as a woman was viewed negatively. That notion has pretty much gone by the wayside now. Instead, there's an emphasis on listening and building a collaborative atmosphere in a more accepted way, and according to experts, a more productive negotiating style for both men and women. Eileen Kisley, a vice president of planning and analysis at Prudential, said that years ago when she was first put in charge of a team, her attitude was, I'm going to be number one, I'm going to win. But she added that women in the workforce who were not aggressive and did not dig their heels in risked being ignored professionally. Now she says that things have completely changed. Our company and the business world have evolved, thankfully, and I think we all feel that. Here you see a comic that was published in the New Yorker a couple of years ago. I'm pretty sure we've all experienced at least one of these feelings in our careers, and let's call them feelings. We should recognize how effective these feelings, or our intuition, can be in the workplace. This comes under the umbrella of positive female stereotypes. And what are some positive female stereotypes? Verbal acuity. I think people feel that we are better that way. Building relationships, nurturing, a good sense on how to read people. Oh, I feel so terrible doing this. I hate to negotiate. So is anybody related to that? Can you really go to a flea market, and you really like this object and you just want to buy it? It's a common sentiment for women, and this is precisely why we're going to discuss it today. The thing is, because women don't negotiate very often, it becomes a big deal, as opposed to men for whom it feels normal because they do it so often. In fact, only 28% of women negotiate versus 42% of men. However, virtually everything is negotiable. According to one of my former professors, Lee Thompson, who teaches negotiation at Kellogg, there are clear differences in how men and women approach negotiation. Studies show that women set less aggressive goals and make less assertive opening offers, and that's even if they choose to negotiate in the first place. In researching for this topic, I found a lot of available resources. I've listed some in the booklet that I'll send out. However, practicing and discussing as a group has a lot of benefits, and the concepts can sink in better. You may consider having a fun team building at your next staff meeting. So now I'm going to show you some of the tools and techniques that you can use to become a better negotiator yourself. So this is a little bit of a sad slide because we know that, Angry Cat died this past week. I don't know if you guys follow the internet, but anyway, the point of the slide is practice saying no. The first thing is to practice saying no. 2 letters, 1 syllable. Why is it so hard for us to say no? So according to a psychologist, his name's Hank Davis, it's because women believe that an assertive answer will elicit a negative response. So think about that. I want you to start practicing saying no. Saying no is tougher than it sounds. When your boss asks you to take on an assignment that's out of your comfort zone, or when your friend needs help moving, you often comply out of a sense of responsibility or out of fear of how you'll look if you give a rejection. So we do this in everyday society, even when a person asks us to cut in line at the supermarket or at the airport because they're late for a flight. But in negotiation, if you want to leverage your position, you must necessarily reject an offer that's already on the table, even if it's only implicitly. I want you to think about that. Accordingly, you have to practice saying no to become more comfortable with this part of the process. That doesn't mean you shouldn't, this does not mean you should start saying no to everything, but it's far easier if you start becoming comfortable with lower stakes situations like the ones I mentioned above about the supermarket or the airport, than if you try to hold your ground in a high stakes situation like a job interview. The booklet that you'll be receiving has a whole page devoted to this, and here's why. We need to practice the skill of the good old-fashioned no. After this webinar, over the next several weeks, every time you say no, I want you to cross out one of the no's in your booklet and pat yourself on the back. Now we're going to move on to another technique for a successful negotiation. Let's watch this short video.
So look, when you've got...
Okay, definitely. Hey, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Is it all right if I come in?
Oh, please, my office is always open for bright young minds.
I've always liked that about you.
Thanks. Is there anything I can help you with?
Could I have a seat?
Oh, please. Right.
In my seat?
Oh, right. This one. There you go.
Hey, just don't touch my stuff. Give me. What are you holding on to that?
The door was...
Just like over there. What do you want, David?
I want an A. You're giving me an F.
That's because you're failing.
I think you're missing the big picture here, Mr. Reggie.
And what is that?
It's not that I don't care. It's that I care too much, you know? I'm too concerned with my education. And believe me, I want to learn.
Oh, without a doubt.
And with a mind that works like mine on such a higher level, I've become overly bored with such a simplistic curriculum you have going here. And to be honest, Mr. Reggie, I'm being wasted. Yeah.
So the failure lies with me.
It really hurts me to say this and agree with you, but yes.
Okay. David, if I apologize to you, will you get out of my office?
Will you give me an A?
Not in a million years.
Why not?
Because you're not even trying.
Mr. Reggie, it's just a philosophy class.
Excuse me.
I mean, no offense, but this is a damn waste of my time.
Oh, now I gotta take offense to that.
It's just a bunch of people making up excuses for the way they want to live.
Well, it should come very naturally for you.
Can't take it as seriously as a real class.
Do you take anything seriously?
Given the circumstance.
David, why are you at college? You're not a real student.
I am too. I go to class, I wear a backpack, and I'm captain of my intramural ultimate frisbee team.
You know it's a open campus with lax security. Anybody could get on here.
I have a campus ID and I pay tuition.
I mean, this could just be an elaborate prank from the board of directors. Maybe it's just a dream sequence I'm experiencing.
But I'm here complaining to you. You wouldn't be wasting your time with just anyone. Only a student.
You'd be very surprised how I waste my time.
I complain, therefore I am. A student.
That's the philosophy of Rene Descartes.
None of this matters anyway. I mean, a college degree is meaningless. Higher education is dead.
Well, that's Friedrich Nietzsche. Or Nietzsche. I don't know.
And none of your teachers agree on anything. I mean, what's right for you is wrong for Mr. Zadak. Your tests are subjective.
Soren Kierkegaard.
And you teachers think you're so above us students. I wish one day our student body would just rise up and destroy your classes.
Okay, Karl Marx. I get it. Move. I don't know how, but you have a surprisingly decent grasp of philosophy. I don't think you understand or believe half of what you're saying, but that's better than most of my students.
Well, how about we revisit this failing thing, huh?
All right, well, maybe you don't deserve an F.
How about an A?
How about a C?
Yes!
Minus.
Oh, okay, because I was going to settle for a D, but you got me there. I'll take the C minus. You know what I mean there, Mr. Reggie? You're such a sucker.
Please shut up. Oh, God, I hate my students.
Okay, I'm back, so I hope you enjoyed the video. What technique did you think was at play here? The technique is called anchoring, added with the technique of opening first, meaning that being the first one to make an offer. How do you think the professor felt when the student said at the end, I would have taken a D? This particular phenomenon is called winner's curse, the winner's curse in negotiations, when a negotiator overbids for an item due to competitive pressure or non-value related factors. Here the professor got wrapped up on the fact that the student was espousing philosophical theories, and he offered a grade that the student likely didn't really deserve. And the reason this is important is that you have to be prepared and stick to your playbook when negotiating. In this case, I think there was some immediate regret from the professor because he could already sort of tell he had been had, and that's when he went from a C to a C minus. So, okay, so moving on, is anyone familiar with this term? The term is called heuristic. There's some people that say that the movie 12 Angry Men displays all the major heuristics. And heuristics are inevitable shortcuts given the limitation of the human brain. When finding an optimal solution is impossible or impractical, heuristic techniques, often called just heuristic, are methods that can be used to speed up the process of finding a satisfactory solution. You need these to be a good negotiator. Heuristics are merely mental shortcuts we use, which ease the cognitive load of making a decision. So examples of heuristic are rule of thumb, educated guess, intuitive judgment, guesstimate, stereotype, profiling, common sense, or, in addition, the commonly used technique of anchoring. So anchoring, this describes the common tendency that folks rely too heavily on the first piece of information offered, which is called the anchor, when making decisions. So there's been studies done. There was a study done with children, and the children were told to estimate the number of jelly beans in a jar, and groups of children were given either a high or a low starting number or anchor. And the children tended to estimate the number of jelly beans to be closer to the anchor than the anchor number that they were originally given. So they were able to test this theory. In the philosophy student video, we saw the example of the student anchoring the professor at an A grade instead of just asking the professor, please don't fail me. So he went in there and said, I want an A. A practical application in your job would be, for example, asking for a raise, asking for budget dollars for your department, or asking for staffing levels. Anchor high. So let's focus on pulling some of these concepts together in a toolbox. I can't go through every single piece of this toolbox, but I picked out the 3 bolded items to really dive into. The toolbox consists of things such as knowing your BATNA, and we'll go into this in the following slides, assessing the counterparty's BATNA, and so once you know what your BATNA is, you need to try to determine what your counterparty's BATNA is. Setting high aspirations, you have to be realistic but optimistic, and research shows that some women undervalue their worth. We have to be aware of this. Open first if you're prepared, just like the philosophy student did, and immediately re-anchor if the other party opens aggressively, when the philosophy professor tried to do. So the student said, I want an A, the professor said, I want an F, the student said, I want an A. Last, stick to your script. Do not get thrown off by the negotiation strategy of the person across the table. So the first tool I want to show you in your negotiation toolbox is BATNA. You need to know your BATNA. Of course, in a negotiation, it's always important to know your counterparty's BATNA before you even get to the table. So what is BATNA anyway? Some of you might be familiar with the term, but if you're not, so BATNA stands for the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Does anyone know what this actually means? You know, the best way that I explain this is, what would happen if I am not able to reach a deal with the person across the table? What is my plan B? If I had to walk away from the table, where do I walk to? Do I go back to my current job? Do I have a trust fund to back me up? Do I go back to school? What is my plan B if I have to walk away from, say, a job negotiation? So the key source of power is your ability to walk away. If you have a lot of options to walk away from the table, you will be a stronger negotiator. So one way to know if the negotiation won't be successful is if you cannot achieve a conversion within the zone of possible agreement. So what is the zone of possible agreement? We call this ZOPA. Why does it matter? There's a lot of information online that you can look up, but really what that says is where you come to a meeting of the minds, when the negotiator and the person negotiating with them have an agreed upon area which agreement could be reached. So this will exist if there is a potential agreement that would benefit both sides more than their other options. In the example above, you might be in a salary negotiation, and after taking this webinar, you would have anchored high while your potential employer would have anchored low. But after a couple of counter offers, it appears that you might be okay with the offered salary. That's when you know you've reached ZOPA. In order for disputing parties to identify ZOPA, they must first know their alternatives and thus their bottom lines or their walkaway positions. I think some people, when they're buying homes, they're so annoyed with the process of making an offer and then there's a counter offer and there's an offer. But this is the home buyer and the home seller are trying to find out where that ZOPA is. So let's take a quick quiz. Should you reveal your BATNA? No, please do not. Should you lie about your BATNA? Again, no. Should you signal your BATNA? Absolutely yes. You have options. So now I'm going to show you a BATNA scenario in a movie that you might be familiar with. The volume might be a little high or low. You might have to adjust it on your screen, but let's take a look at this little video clip.
Who are you?
My name is Andy Sachs. I recently graduated from Northwestern University.
And what are you doing here?
Well, I think I could do a good job as your assistant. And, yeah, I came to New York to be a journalist and sent letters out everywhere and then finally got a call from Elias Clark and met with Sherry up at Human Resources. And basically it's this or Auto Universe.
So you don't read Runway?
No.
And before today, you had never heard of me?
No.
And you have no style or sense of fashion?
Well, I think that depends on what you're...
No. That wasn't a question.
I was editor-in-chief of the Daily Northwestern. I also won a national competition for college journalists with my series on the Janitors Union, which exposed the exploitation of... Yeah, okay. You're right. I don't fit in here. I am not skinny or glamorous, and I don't know that much about fashion, but I'm smart. I learn fast, and I will work very hard.
I've got the exclusive on the Cavalli for Gwyneth. But the problem is, with that huge feathered headdress that she's wearing, she looks like she's working the main stage at the Golden Nugget.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your time.
Who is that sad little person? Are we doing a before and after piece I don't know about?
Okay, well, welcome back to the to the webcast. All right, so this is an interesting clip from The Devil Wears Prada, and it's a little bit about this situation where there was a negotiation going on, but unless you're really studying what negotiation is, you don't really understand what's at play here or what heuristics were being employed. There's a scarcity heuristic, and it stems from the idea that the more difficult it is to acquire the item, the more value that the item has. And in many situations, we use an item's availability and its perceived abundance to quickly estimate quality or utility. So in the previous example, this was just a job interview, but using her BATNA, even though it felt like Andy was losing the negotiation, but using her BATNA, Andy was able to indicate how much value she would bring to Miranda's organization. What I found really interesting about this video is that this was not a typical candidate that Miranda ever saw. She was used to getting people that were really more trying to, impress her with their, knowledge of her industry. And so she saw something in Andy that she really was very unique. It was something that she normally doesn't get to interface with. It was a scarcity heuristic. It was a heuristic that she wasn't used to seeing. And ultimately, Andy was able to get the job. So when you are starting on and you're in a negotiating process, having a keen awareness of your goals, your strengths, and your fellow negotiator's position can be immeasurably influence the result of the agreement you're seeking. When you clearly know what the best alternative is, make it known that you have walk-away power. Andy did walk away. She didn't beg for that job. So spending a lot of time understanding your BATNA is the foundation of successful negotiation. You can assess and increase your own BATNA using this list. I'm not going to read it, but if you feel like you want a different degree or you want to do a lateral to get some more job experience, et cetera, always understand what your BATNA is. What are your alternatives? The other interesting one that's not on this list but really, really helps increase your BATNA is if you are always looking for other jobs. And if you're trying to do a job interview and you're negotiating for another job or you're trying to negotiate for a raise, if your employer understands that you understand your market worth, that can increase your BATNA. Remember when I introduced the toolkit, this was the second bolded item, this set high aspirations. And as I mentioned earlier, the research shows there are behavioral differences between genders when it comes to negotiation. The research shows that women set less aggressive goals. Women don't perform as well as men in terms of value claiming. They don't ask for enough. They don't ask for enough or as much as men. And they don't choose to negotiate in situations where men do. As I told you before, 42% of the time a man will negotiate, 28% of the time a woman will negotiate. So women believe that assertive behavior will elicit a negative response. And the research backs that up, unfortunately. Experiments show that the willingness to initiate a negotiation is different based on gender. It's because men and women still get treated differently when they do. According to a study conducted by a team of researchers at Harvard, women tend to be less inclined to negotiate when they have a male evaluator, and women who ask are not perceived in a positive light. How do we change this? It starts with sticking to your guns, or in this case, sticking to your script. Remember, earlier I mentioned you should practice saying no. This will make it easier if you imagine that you're saying no on behalf of someone else. So if you are having a hard time sticking to your script and sticking to your guns, make sure you know you're negotiating on behalf of your family or behalf of the rest of your organization if you're trying to negotiate for a project, or you're negotiating on behalf of the customer. So make sure you walk into that negotiation feeling like you're negotiating not only for yourself. So think of negotiation as a female skill, not the male's domain. Know your market worth. Don't answer the question, what is your current salary? This is a way future employers try to anchor you. Either don't fill it in, or if they ask you verbally, you can answer, my total compensation package currently is. Speaking of which, are pay gaps real? Are they still real after all these years? Well, as of 2018, women still only earn 85 cents for every dollar a man earns. And what is very alarming, this is down from 93 cents for every dollar a man earned in 2015. So it's actually getting worse. So we've got to learn to negotiate. Speaking of total compensation packages, how do you effectively negotiate features of a total compensation package? Let me give you another technique. MESO, we call this. It stands for multiple equivalent simultaneous offers, and MESO is a technique that works in concert with some of the other tools we've been talking about. It's a great thing to practice next time you're asked to propose options for something at work or a job interview or some sort of negotiation. I actually helped my brother get a large salary increase in a job negotiation using this method. It works, and I'll show you a sample on the next slide. Here's a sample. and it's a grid. It's just an easy way maybe to help you organize your thoughts around this. But you see, you have a grid that outlines a company's opening job offer and then the 3 alternate proposals. And what you do is you create these packages as approximately the same value for each of the packages. And so your counter offer to a company, or it could be your initial offer depending on the type of negotiation you're going for, your counter offer can be not 1 but 3 counter offers, and say, well, hey, you can pay me $110,000 with a signing bonus and some stock and 3 weeks vacation, and I'll start June 15th, or you can pay me only $90,000, but I sure as heck want a $25,000 signing bonus, etc. And so what happens is you're able to signal to the employer to the potential employer what you think your market value is and how flexible you can be in creating a total compensation package for yourself. So to prepare your MESO, as you saw from the examples, you want to be creative, you want to know the industry, and in some cases it's okay to send the sample options to your potential future employer as in advance, because what you're essentially doing is you're anchoring them to what you believe your total compensation needs to be. Let's transition to another aspect of negotiation. You can gain the edge in negotiation with fantastic nonverbal and body language tips to increase your rate of success and stay way ahead of the game. Show up on time, perfect the handshake, please perfect the handshake. Negotiate with the right people, make friendly eye contact. You don't have to be intense, you just have to be friendly. Be aware of your facial expressions, maintain personal space. You know, we had sort of a brainstorming at the seminar where I taught this, and there were like 20 more that people came up with. There's many, many ways to non-verbally make a good impression in a negotiation. So what we did with MESO is we showed you how you can end up putting more negotiable items on the table. An employer might have just offered you a salary, but by using MESO, you've expanded the amount of options available to create a successful negotiation. And this is a way we can realize a much more multifaceted job offer. And this is known as expanding the pie. This is very important because it takes us away from the typical win-lose of negotiation. If you expand the pie, you're also expanding the potential that you are going to meet at an appropriate ZOPA, a zone of possible agreement. This is a way that you increase the odds of a successful negotiation. And I want to leave time if people have questions. So we're going to wrap this up by taking a short quiz over, to go over some of the key points from the last approximately half hour. So you guys ready for a quiz? Okay. All right. So BATNA stands for the best blank to a blank agreement. You guys ready? Is everybody awake? Answer: negotiated, alternative negative, alternative negotiated. C, alternative negotiated. So BATNA stands for the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Okay, question 2, true or false? Almost everything is negotiable. False or true? True, of course it's true. If I want you to remember one thing, I want you to remember this one. Please negotiate. Question 3, the range in which two parties can make a deal is known as the ZOPA, the BATNA, or the MESO. ZOPA, it's the zone of possible agreement. Question 4, the film 12 Angry Men is noted by psychologists to display the 12 classic what? Algorithms, reasoning methods, or heuristics? Heuristics. Okay. Question 5. Blank are presented as intact, not a la carte. MESO, ZOPA, BATNA. MESO, that's correct. When you're putting together a MESO, you can't let an employer or negotiator cherry pick the different items. They come as intact, separate, equally levels of compensation packages. Okay, question 6. In a negotiation, if the other party opens aggressively, you should immediately concede, re-anchor, or walk away. Re-anchor. Please re-anchor. This really works at flea markets, as I said before. You would be amazed. Okay, question 7. When you clearly know your BATNA, you have blank, blank, blank. You have guaranteed successful outcome, walk away power, or the upper hand. I didn't read that fast enough, but please remember, you have walk away power. You do not have to accept something that's not appropriate. Question 8. Blank is the common human tendency to rely on the first piece of information offered. Aligning, posturing, anchoring. Anchoring. Question 9. A tactic of negotiation with the goal of getting more benefit for both parties is known as expanding the pie, zero sum, mutually beneficial. Expanding the pie. Okay, last question. When possible, the aim of your negotiation should be a blank, blank outcome. Win-lose, win-win, lose-lose. Yes, of course it's a win-win. Okay, so I specifically asked to be able to talk about this topic today at a Women in Utilities webinar because I believe this is a very empowering set of tools that have proven effective for me. I hope this has given you some insight into tools that you can start applying today. I mentioned before, these are great techniques to practice with your team. When I send out this presentation, as I said before, I'll include like this handy booklet, and the techniques will be there for you at a glance. I cannot tell you how often in my work and my personal life I have utilized these techniques to not only help my brother, but to mentor my team in becoming more proficient at life's little negotiations. So now I promise to leave a few minutes for Q&A, and does anyone have any questions about what we've talked about today?
Hey, Sharon, thank you so much. This has been just a really great presentation. I'm so glad that you joined us today to share this with us. We have had a couple of questions come in, so I'll go ahead and start with those that came in earlier. One of the questions one of the attendees asked is, in the municipal utility business, everything is usually very well defined. There isn't a lot of room for negotiation. What do you recommend in those situations?
So it's so interesting because similar question came up when I was teaching this seminar, and it was really quite insightful because we think we work, a lot of us work in the utility industry or related industries, and we think there's all these rules and regulations, and really many businesses have rules and regulations. But what was astounding is somebody posed a similar question and the entire room raised their hand and gave examples of the tiny little negotiations that they had all received that were counter to what a typical standard, job offer would be. Some had actually negotiated, half-day Friday. Some had negotiated a paid additional phone. Some had negotiated definitely stock option signing bonuses, and some had negotiated, the ability to hire, staff. So they were offered a job, and they said, well, I'll accept the job at the current salary, but I need to have 2 assistants, those types of things. So it really is, when I say that virtually everything is negotiable, it means that regardless of what industry you're in. I think people would be very surprised And I hope everybody on this webinar, takes a chance and tries to negotiate something. And again, try something small, but I think people would be very surprised at how much truly really is negotiable.
Very good. I'm going to answer real quick to, I've had a couple of people send in inquiring about the video links. Am I correct in saying that those links are listed in the PDF release or their booklet?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, great. So that will get that question off the board there. All right, so I have had another question come in. This one is asking, you spoke about negotiating for a new job opportunity. Would you use the same tactics to negotiate a higher salary for a current position?
Yes, you absolutely would do that. There's so many different, I don't want to overwhelm people when they're doing this, but this is absolutely what you should do. First of all, the very first step to approach this is to absolutely ask. I think so often we've seen in the research that women simply don't ask. They don't know if it's their turn. There's a lot of studies that I've read where it shows that when you have these put men and women in these experiments, a lot of women, they say this is the job that is this is the raise you're asking, this is the raise that we want you to ask for. And if given the same set of circumstances, it's proven that women will naturally assume that they're not as qualified and ask for a lower raise, where men who have the same exact qualifications or less qualifications always ask for a higher raise. And I think this particular experiment and evidence can affect why I said there's only 85 cents to every dollar a man makes. We only earn 85 cents. I think part of it is we are not being assertive in asking for what we're really worth. So I absolutely, people need to do their homework and understand what the market and the rest of the company is being paid. You have to go in with having a really high BATNA, but you should also anchor high when asking for a job raise.
Okay, pardon me. And this one tees right into this next question that came in. It says, what if you don't have a more desirable job option on the table, but your current negotiation isn't going well? Do you settle or do you walk away?
That is, it's a personal choice. I find, there's all these wonderful quotes about, paraphrasing, that failure sometimes is the best thing that can ever happen to you. So if a job negotiation isn't going well, and you walk away and, have your current position, there's absolutely nothing wrong with walking away from a negotiation. And there's also, depending on how, when you follow these techniques, they're very professional techniques. This is not about burning any bridges. And so if you are involved in a negotiation that isn't going well, and you feel that you don't have the BATNA, or you haven't done your research, or you misjudged or don't know what your counterparty's BATNA is, and your gut is telling you to walk away, then walk away, but don't burn any bridges. Just say, whatever the circumstance is, whether it's something like this doesn't, we don't really have a meeting of the minds right now, but this has been very wonderful to interact with you and talk to you, and I hope to talk to you about more opportunities in the future. There's a lot of ways to walk away and keep the door open, so that's what I would suggest.
Very good. So the next question that came in says, you mentioned it's important to know your worth. How do you determine what that number would be?
The absolute easiest way is to, how I had a very good colleague, give me this analogy. I think it's a perfect analogy. We're pretty good about getting a medical checkup, at least once a year. You go and you get your vitals checked and you make sure nothing's wrong with your eyesight and your hearing, and you just check everything, and we just make sure we have a health checkup every year. Well, you should do the same thing for your career. You should have at least one external interview every year. What does that do for you? It helps you keep your interview skills honed. It makes sure you keep your resume, your CV up to date. Those interviews might result in a job offer, or at least you get a callback. So at least you sort of understand if you're in the running for certain types of positions. And whatever the results of that interview are, whether it results in an offer or just at least an interview, you have an understanding of jobs that you would be potentially could get in the marketplace. And so you take whatever those salaries are, and you know in your head that that's what your market worth is. And that's the best way really to make sure, because you can sort of assume that you might be worth more in the market, but until you actually make yourself have a market-based interview, you won't really be as confident in what your value is.
Good point. The next question that came in is asking about what your recommendations are to move the ZOPA range without having to compromise your high and low parameters.
So the question was how to move the ZOPA range?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, well, the ZOPA range is the ZOPA range. I mean, I think it's just sort of like the only way you can tweak the ZOPA range is with that technique, the multiple equivalent simultaneous offers, because, quite frankly, if the person, if you're in let's just do the whole like flea market, if this person's selling this item, they know what their cost is and they know what their profit, they want their profit margin, but you really aren't willing to pay, anywhere near where that number is, you're not going to get to a ZOPA. But if you say, okay, well, if the flea market person really wants to sell this and you're not quite in their ZOPA, but they want to throw in like a, they'll say, well, if you pay me X, I'll throw in this trinket. And you see that happen, right? You see these negotiations happen all the time. So you can actually arrive at a ZOPA by just tweaking kind of what's on the table. And that translates obviously into this multiple equivalent simultaneous offers, because if you put many, many, many different things on the table, your negotiator might, like, for example, here's a very specific example. If they can't really pay you a higher base salary, if they can only offer you $90,000 base salary, but HR, for a brand new employee, for the first year, they're willing to give you an extra week vacation, that's a way you can sort of expand the possibility of reaching ZOPA by expanding the pie, by adding more options on the table.
Yeah, I've always had read too that the total compensation is what you should look at, not just the base salary. What other benefits could be factored in that could expand it. So that's good information. I'm not showing any more questions on my side. So Sharon, I wanted to ask you and maybe even Shauna if y'all are seeing any in the queue that I'm not seeing. Here we go. Here's a question that came in. It said, what about negotiation with coworkers rather than bosses?
What was the question?
Negotiation with coworkers rather than bosses. So I'm wondering if our attendee might expand on that, or do you understand that, what she's asking?
Well, I mean, every day of our life we're in a constant negotiation, so you're absolutely right. We deal with the marketing department quite a bit, and those are really our colleagues, and you never want those interactions to be win-lose. So when you're dealing with other divisions or departments or, just other people that you work with on different boards that you're in, no negotiation, should be anything. You should strive always for the win-win. So those techniques should absolutely work with colleagues, because we're negotiating really almost everything in our life really is negotiable. And the way that I start out some of those interactions is, I would love your expertise in this, and then this is my operational issue. Can you give me some options? So you should treat everything as much as possible as a negotiation and not as a transaction.
Very good. Well, I think that's all the questions I have. I cut you off earlier. Did y'all see any other in your queue, or?
No, we're good. We're good here. And I really appreciate everybody's time here today. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to me directly.
That's terrific. Sharon, thank you so much for joining us today. This has just been such an incredibly and excellently provided presentation and all the information. We're looking forward to releasing that PDF to everyone. Attendees, we thank you so much for joining us today, and also wanted to thank our sponsor, AAC Utility Partners, and Cassandra for joining us today. And in light of saving everyone a little bit of time this afternoon, we'll go ahead and conclude the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.